Welcome to the Why Not podcast with me, Chrissy Hawkins. In a world where everybody always asks why, I'm here to ask, why not? I'll be breaking down the mindsets of guests as well as my own in a bid to find out what makes people say, why not? Hello guys, so today's interview I'm really excited about. I have got Shane Walsh of shanewalshfitness and the very esteemed shanewalshfitness podcast. So yeah, today I'm really excited having this. I'm not gonna lie, I was very excited when he said yes, as I am a big fan of his podcast. I listen to it quite a bit, but it was a really nice chat. I was originally supposed to talk mostly about the podcast and how he got it developed and got it going, but we kind of went into female fat loss for a little bit, came back out, talked about mindset around business, and yeah, we kind of went on a few little tangents here and there. We even got a lovely rant out of Shane because I love hearing them on his podcast, so it's always good too. And even my internet tried to kill the podcast at one point, and thankfully we got back and managed to finish it. So hopefully that won't come across. I'm going to edit it so well you will have no idea. But yeah, so I'm really excited here, guys. So as ever, if you are, sit back, relax and enjoy, or walk and listen, whichever is the way you are listening to that podcast, you enjoy it. Okay guys, so welcome back to the Why Not podcast. Today I have got another guest for you. I have got Shane Walsh Fitness. If you don't know about him already, he probably has one of the best podcasts in Ireland right now. I'm going to let Shane introduce himself a little bit and tell you guys all about him. So Shane, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Chrissy. Nice little intro regarding the podcast and stuff. So thank you for that, because I know you share the podcast and you listen to it and DM me and stuff about the podcast. So when you messaged me to come on, I was more than humbled and more than agreeable to kind of have a chat and stuff. So my background, where do I start? So the host of the Shane Walsh Fitness podcast. So that's like number one nutrition podcast on Apple in Ireland at the minute, which is mental.
Yes,
and been lucky to have the likes of Natalie Lennon, Brian Keane, Darren Cartel, Sonny Webster, Siobhan, Sinead, like so many different names. That episode, I'm recording episode 156, I think, with Dallas, is the other coach that works for me, the owner of Shane Walsh Fitness. And I've got Dallas working with me at the minute, and we're announcing the new coach tomorrow. So that's all signed up and we're ready to go to grow that team, which is amazing. We have a crew of clients called Team SWF, and everyone's different. Everyone has different goals. I predominantly work in female fat loss. I do have lads as well, but the main thing will be females. And I started off doing face-to-face PT. I used to have a real job for a while in recruitment.
I love how we always call that a real job in this industry.
I know, yeah. I just find that it's a real job compared to what I do now. Yeah. I worked in sales and recruitment for 5 years, and I was very unhappy mentally, physically, everything. And then I started a new job in April 2017 on the Monday, and then on Friday, on the Saturday morning, I woke up with 2 blood clots. So my body was trying to tell me something, and I had to listen to it. I was very unhappy, fell into a very dark place. And then 2 weeks later, I went back into office after they were kind of hounding me to go back in, and collapsed on the floor with fluid on my lungs. So that was right, this is a sign, need to move, something needs to change. So I had to take time out, look after myself mentally, fell into a dark place, and then kind of started doing a little bit of fitness, a little bit of walking, just trying and keep my routine. And then found a few podcasts. I never really listened to podcasts before, and then I found a certain sentence on a podcast that was stop caring what other people think.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that was kind of holding me back for a very long time. Was you need to be in a career. You need to be in a career that you can progress in, rather than trying to be self-employed. But I always knew I wanted to work for myself. I didn't know what it was. So then I went traveling with my best mate over to Asia, and started training before that. And then when we were over there, I started training people over there. I was like, all right, I can get in shape. I'm helping these people get in shape. This means anyone can get into shape, whatever shape means. And that was kind of like, right, that was it. So in the airport coming back from Vietnam, I booked my PT course, and 3 years in business, over 3 years in business now, and it's scary to see where it's kind of grown. But it's I did my hours face to face in one of the main gyms, and went fully online the December before COVID hit. And it's gone a little bit nuts.
So you timed that well, going when you went online.
Yeah, like I was doing online already with some of them, and I was kind of pushing myself a lot because I was studying at the same time to become a nutritionist. I was doing the mad hours of PT and clients. I was trying to run the business. I was trying to do the podcast. I was really, really pushing myself to the absolute limit, but I'm glad I ate, as Paul Moore would say, I ate shit for 2 years to try and get it to where it is now. And I don't think if I hadn't have kind of pushed myself that much, I don't think I'd be in the position. I don't think I'd be doing the podcast. I nearly gave up the podcast.
Oh, really?
I nearly gave up the podcast in December 19. And I was chatting to a few people, and they were like, don't stop it, maybe bring it back to one episode. I brought it back to one episode, and I found a love of it again. And it was just, my body was just trying to tell me to stop again. But now, like with the lockdown happening, I was kind of like, well, there's going to be more people's ears on the podcast, so let's try and get 2 episodes out a week. We've got a new format now with Coach's Corner with Dallas, and the new coach will be kind of joining, going mental, because you guys are giving us the content for it. Whoever listens to it, and clients are telling us, so we just put those into a format where Dallas and I go on rants, and people seem to like rants, so we'll continue doing it.
The rants are very good, I have to say, and as like I am an avid listener of the podcast, because obviously it's brilliant. What made you start the podcast in the first place?
I went to a business day down up in Galway in December 18, and I was kind of following Brian Keane for a while, because he was the one that said that sentence of stop caring what other people think. So met Brian when I was working in the main chain, the big chain of gyms, through an event that he came in for. So I got to chat with him then, got chatting to him through DM, and I went to the event. Like, it wasn't overly expensive, it was like 200 quid or something. And it was kind of, he was talking about how to grow your business, and he mentioned about, like, he went through like pricing, he went through all that kind of stuff, and then he sort of mentioned the podcast. And at that time, podcasts were there, but they weren't as mainstream as they are now. Like, everyone has a podcast now. And he's kind of like, well, if you don't start a podcast by Monday, you're not going to start a podcast, or if you don't start a podcast by Friday, you're not going to start it. So on the Monday, I recorded my first episode off my phone. So if you listen to the first few episodes are off my phone, like Orla is my first guest. So Orla was a PT that I used to work with, and they're all off my phone. They're shit. They're 100% shit. You can make a drinking game out of the amount of times to say on it. They're really, really bad. But they were a way for me to find out if I wanted to do that. And I've improved my writing style in posts and stuff like that. But I find the speaking medium a lot more beneficial for me. It allows me to get a view off my chest, and allows me to, like with Instagram posts and stuff, you're restricted in the word count, but with a podcast you can latch on. And then it was just about, I wanted to try and get more people in to listen to it, so I was kind of, right, I'll go and get more people on it, and guests, and chance my arm. And been really, really lucky who I've completely chanced my arm. Like, until my dad's motto is, if you don't ask, you don't get.
It's good point.
So it's kind of like, well, I might as well try it. And if you had said to me in December 18 to see where it is now, I would have laughed you out of the room. And I'm very, very lucky with the way it's going. But there's always a way for me to improve it, different style of guests, different ways to improve my interview style, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's I love doing the podcast, found the love of it again, and I've been very, very lucky with what's happened with it so far.
You mentioned about when you first started, actually, that you used to say all the time. I listened to that, I think it was either on Brian Keane's podcast or on his business podcast when you were on it, and you were talking about that. And from that, I can't unhear anything when I'm editing, and the M's drive me mad. How did you find?
When you find the ads, I don't really tend to edit them unless something has been said that is a little bit off.
Yeah.
If I don't, like, I know with some podcasts and stuff, you need to get a point of view that isn't necessarily your own to kind of make it a decent discussion. And I'm all for that. But if someone comes out and says something is definitive, like this is the way to do something, especially with nutrition, like there's no definitives in nutrition. The research is changing all the time. But if someone comes out and gives this definitive thing, you're kind of like, can I really say that? I generally don't. I don't re-record Dallas's stuff or the Coach's Corner episodes. I don't edit them really. If there's a little bit of changing or someone asks me to take something out, I will edit it. But generally, I don't. And I just feel it's a little bit more natural, even if the kind of like Zoom goes in and out or whatever it may be. I think it makes it a little bit more human, because if it's polished, people love it or whatever it may be. But I find my own style is the kind of the ranty, more unedited versions seem to be a little bit more, bring a little bit more human element into it. But that could be me just talking absolute smack, if I'm being honest. But that's I just don't have the time to kind of edit it. If it needs editing, I'll edit, but I won't edit it if it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, it seems to be working your style, so I don't think you should stop. What was I going to ask? See, there we say M's now. Has the podcast had an effect on the growth of your business?
I don't think I'd have a business without the podcast.
Oh, really?
And that's 100%. Like, you don't, like, the one thing that I've known, or like, I wouldn't have a massive following on social media compared to others. Like, it's what, 5,000 or something like that, and that's only kind of really grown in the last, or drastically grown in the last little while, because there's more eyes on social media.
Yeah.
But with the podcast allows you to get your point of view across. It allows you to show your approach to coaching. It allows you to show what you're all about. And I think the episode that kind of brought in a different environment for me and a different relationship with whoever was listening at the time was, I think, episode 11. I was like, my story. And that allows people to kind of like, this person isn't polished. Everyone has shit going on.
Yeah.
And it allowed that barriers to be drawn down. And then you find over time that from doing the podcast, whatever you're interested in kind of goes through phases. So I remember one of my clients saying that you're having an awful lot of like nutrition people on. Why don't you try this style? So I was like, well, she's going to be listening to the podcast, so why don't I try this? Yeah. I'm always open to more things, but the podcast allows you to get your point of view across. It allows you to become on certain topics, which for some reason, the female fat loss thing seems to be where my niche seems to be, which is completely accidental. I know that's one of your questions as well, and which I'll talk about. But it's, if you can help that, and then if people message you about the podcast, and they'll generally give you the topics, it's about understanding what people want in the podcast. And it normally takes about 50-60 episodes to find what you want to do. And most people will give up after about 10. That's the problem. And I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm very type A personality, in that if I want to do something, I'll do it. If I don't want to do it, I won't do it. And that was the same through school. Like, I didn't apply myself at school. But if I find something that I'm interested in, I'll run in head first into a wall and figure it out from there. And I've made mistakes with the podcast. I've said stuff on the podcast. I've said things that and I've potentially had guests that have said things as well, but I can't control what anyone else is going to do. All I can do is say to myself, right, that I can make this the best thing that I can possibly be. Is it going to be the best podcast in the world, or is it ever going to be the best podcast in the world? That's not what the aim of it is. It is the aim of the podcast is whoever's listening to it is to try and help them the most.
Yeah, that's actually the exact reason that I have mine as well. Now, I don't have a huge amount of listeners, but again, if I can help one person, and just you saying about that type A personality, I was like listening to me. I was the same in school. But you mentioned the female fat loss, which is actually a really great segue for me to bring it into it. How did you end up in that niche? So
when I first started doing face-to-face PT, I was like, I'm going to get lads jacked. That was the first thing. My first two clients were two housemates, Kamal and Wasfi, in the chain of gyms, and got them jacked. But then through the chain of gyms that I was in, we had to teach a lot of classes.
Yeah.
And what I noticed in the classes was it was predominantly females, and they were asking questions, they were coming up and they're like, oh, will you coach us, all this kind of stuff. And then they were asking certain questions in sessions, they were asking certain questions at the end of classes. I was like, all right, I really need to research this. And then I was on a membership site called Lift the Bar, and I was found that they had a talk on kind of menstrual cycles. And
Yeah.
I think menstrual cycles have a lot of taboo against them, especially in Ireland, because we, up until like the 70s or 80s, the Catholic Church was like, you can't talk about contraception, all this kind of stuff. And I think we're a little bit behind the times on that side of things.
Definitely.
And once I started talking about it, people seem to resonate with it. People seem to like, oh, this is me. Why don't I understand my own body? Let's talk about this. Let's ask questions. And then it just seemed to grow from there. And I think, and I was kind of doing research, a lot of research before that, so that I could be kind of reading an awful lot about it. Lift the Bar really helped. Listen to loads of podcasts about it, reading books about it. And there's never a day that you're not learning about something element. Like I'm still reading books on it, so I listen to podcasts on it. Dallas is there as a sounding board. If you have a question about it, clients are always asking questions. And it's really interesting because every single client is going to be different. Every single girl is going to be different. And that's what makes it fascinating. I've absolutely nothing against coaching lads at all. I do coach lads.
Yeah.
But I find from a female perspective, the physiology, the psychology, anatomy, how the body works, how the body ticks, how every single person is different, that makes it a little bit more interesting for me as a coach.
Yeah.
Like I've had clients from amenorrhea, PCOS, endometriosis, pregnancy, postnatal, menopause, postmenopause, perimenopause. Like there's so many different ailments that, and it's an awful lot of stuff to know.
Yeah.
But I have no problem in saying, right, maybe I'm not the coach for you and refer out.
Oh, you have to be.
I
like
think that's
that
what a lot of
well.
coaches are afraid to do. Like if I feel I can't help someone, say endometriosis. Yeah, I think a lot of people, like coaches, like we do have kind of like, we do have egos. Everyone has an ego, but I think in the fitness industry, egos are a massive driver. And I've no problem in saying, right, if an application comes in, I'm like, oh, that's more suited to Dallas.
Yeah.
And Dallas will be like, oh, Shane, here's someone talking about the menopause. That's for you. So that's the way it works. And then with Jane coming on board, she'll be talking about, like, from a different perspective, she'll have the female side of things in relation to talk about the headspace side of things from a female, because I can't understand that. I can read books on it, but I'll never understand it from what someone has gone through. And Jane has had an incredible journey herself. And I think with the female stuff as well, I think it's there's a female movement happening as well at the minute with the equality, and that's being put on the media, which is incredible. And I think women are becoming a lot more aware of their bodies, being more conscious of how they want to feel, and not letting social norms or societal norms kind of come into it. And that has to be brought into it as well. But it's about understanding themselves. And if you don't understand yourself, you can't expect anyone else to understand you.
Yeah. I think that's the way you said that, like understanding yourself. I think even in females, we don't actually have a lot of understanding of how the whole system works, possibly because they never told us about it growing up. But do you find that interferes a lot when they can't understand, like, say for instance, body fat goals, whatever, girls kind of want to, I don't know if they still do, but that really skinny look, but it's not healthy for them and they don't understand that. Do you think that you come across that a lot?
Yeah, like every single girl has a different goal. And I think when that kind of the skinny thing comes up, is generally driven from the media.
Yeah.
So from the Kate Moss, Cindy Crawford, Marilyn Monroe, kind of now it's kind of the glutes and quads, that side of things. So the movement has changed because the media have changed. The media will tell you what the clothes, and that will dictate what clothes people are buying. So if the movement's going that way, then people will adjust and the goals will change. And there's going to be another shift in relation to glutes and quads, to another movement. And I think what's changing now already is that it's kind of like building in kind of like a strong, confident woman. And that's huge. And I think that's the next paradigm shift that's going to happen. And it is happening at the minute with the likes of some of the big names that are out there trying to promote that, like Ross Purcell and stuff. And that's a huge aspect of it. But I think when someone applies with myself, or we jump on the consultation call at the beginning, we kind of look at what their actual reason why is. Are they doing it from their own perspective, or are they doing it to facilitate what societal norm is? Because if you don't understand why you're doing something, and something doesn't go right, you're going to go off left, right, center.
Yeah.
So I always kind of bring in the 5 whys analogy of why do you want to lose weight? Because losing weight isn't a goal. It's not a big enough goal. Everyone can lose weight. Everyone can gain weight.
Yeah.
And that's just fact. But if you're saying, right, I want to lose weight. Why do you want to lose weight? I want to have more. I want to feel more confident. Why do you want to feel more confident? So I can fit into my clothes. Why do you want to fit into your clothes? So I can get into photos with my kids. Why do you want to get photos into your kids? So they don't have to miss out on activities with my kids. There's your proper why.
Yeah.
Without the proper why, you're going to be pulled left, right, and center. You're going to be pulled in by like gimmicks. But I think what's also happened is there's a massive diet culture that's still out there. And I'm not anti-diet culture. If someone wants to lose weight for the right reason and are prepared to, not like, dieting doesn't have to be difficult. People make dieting very, very difficult from the education that's been provided, and the education hasn't been provided. But if someone is coming to me from, say, a Slimming Club background, they've been put onto a scales and shamed.
Yeah.
And that's not helping confidence. That's not helping any of that element of like education. That's just saying, right, step on this, up or down. Like that's not buying the person. You have to understand the person that you're working with. You have to understand the person that is in front of you, that you're looking back in the mirror. Like the scales can't be the only dictator of your progress. The scales is like rolling a dice in a casino and getting angry when you roll 2 3s rather than 2 6s. You have no control over what that needle says. It's your battle. The scales is dictated by gravity. It's not dictated by like if I set on the scales now at 10:30 and Steph on the scales at 11, I'm going to be 2 different weights. Digestion, where you're on your cycle, sleep, stress, so many different things kind of come into it, and people forget that, and that aggravates them when what they need to try and do is, right, I'm in an amazing headspace. What can I do for me to win the day? Reframe what you're trying to do. Educate yourself when to push, when to stop. And the biggest thing for me regarding the whole thing of the female fat loss stuff is knowing how to understand your body. So if you are stepping on the scales, and not everyone has to do this, but if you are to compare your like weeks with your like weeks. So what I mean by that is if you are comparing your weight loss journey and it's going up and down week to week to week, that's normal.
Yeah.
But if you compare from, say, week 1 of your cycle in February to week 1 of your cycle in March, week 2, week 3, they're more accurate measurements because it's the same things. There's too many hormonal fluctuations, too many stress fluctuations, too much water retention going on. And you're better off looking at, say, all right, I'm down, compare your week 1 in February to week 1 in March, and you can see, all right, I'm down 3 pounds. So but it might go up in week 2, but you can see week two, there's going to be a massive trend, and it's about educating yourself. And there's amazing people like Amelia Thompson, Emma Story Gordon, Leanne Ward, PCOS nutritionists, and there's so many different people that are doing incredible work and trying to get that education out there.
Yeah.
But I think also the taboo needs to be lifted as well. People are afraid to talk about. They're always fascinated. Why is a man, or why is Dallas and me talking about female fat loss on a particular podcast? But over 50% of the world are women. So if it allows you to live the life you want to do, and by putting out 30-40 minute episodes and you latch onto something and that educates you and lets you live a more fulfilling life, what is that not worth the 30 minutes or 40 minutes that's been spent on recording that episode?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Funnily enough, I would have fallen into our bracket who didn't really deal a lot with the whole menstrual cycle. Like I'm on the pill, so it doesn't bother me. But like I used to be like, don't talk about that. And now I've looked into it more, and it's really weird when you're listening to stories from guys like who have studied it more than you, and like, I need to learn about this stuff because it affects me too. Like,
yeah, and I think it's I think also what can happen sometimes is people don't know where to start to look for it because they want all the information right now. It's kind of like a weight loss journey. They want the weight loss gone now, or they want to know everything now. You're never not going to be learning from it.
Yeah.
And it's important to like go for the right sorts of information. I know you've had Aisling on AOK, so she's doing incredible work on that side of things as well. And you have to say to yourself, right, if I can learn something about my body once a week, that would help me. So like even like the pill, like one of the very common questions is like the pill, does the pill cause weight gain?
Yeah.
And a lot of girls don't understand that the pill is an artificial bleed.
Yeah, I know that, yeah.
Giving you the proper estrogen rises so that your bone health will be not very healthy when you get older. But there are also the other side of things is the pill is there to help if you've had massive painful bleeds or heavy flows or whatever. It is a tool for that. But some people are just using it for contraception. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm never going to tell a girl how to work her body or to, but you've got to ask yourself, is this the bigger picture? Is this the best option? Like if you're in your 20s or your 30s and you want to have kids, this the pill, it can, coming off the pill can take a while for things to regulate because there's going to be an artificial bleed for a little while.
Yeah.
And you've got to ask yourself, right, for my overall health long term, is this going to help me? And I think the pill has been thrown around. Medical professionals have a little bit of work to be done on that side of things. The pill can be a plaster over a bigger issue with the likes of endometriosis, PCOS, and I've had clients who were told to go on it with no cycle, and they're like, that's not solving the problem.
No.
It's not educating. It's not, because they're too, they may not have the time, they may not have the education, they may not have the whole system, and it may not be their niche, and there's no problem with that. But don't just tell this is the only way to do it. There has to be different angles. Like if someone of my clients isn't getting an element that I'm talking about, I will have to go and figure out how can I talk about this in a different way, because there's no point in me telling a client what to do.
Yeah.
It has to be a way for them to find it into their life. I think a lot of people are afraid or are a bit shocked when it's like, you haven't uprooted my life. I can have chocolate and ice cream every day. I'm like, yeah, diet doesn't mean take out food. Dieting doesn't have to be difficult. We make it difficult for ourselves through the lack of the education that has been provided to us. Like I didn't know any of this stuff when I was, or any nutrition stuff when I was a kid. It was like, oh, here's your 5 a day.
Yeah.
But how many people do the 5 a day, even though they know it from being 5 years of age? Not many.
That's true, yeah. Do you find women struggle more with the kind of the diet element and stuff? Like you telling them to eat more, they're kind of like freak out about that.
I think with lads, the journey is definitely like, I want to put on muscle and I want to look jacked in my t-shirts and I want to look class in coppers. That's basically the lads mentality.
Yeah.
With girls, it's a very different battle in that it's trying to educate them that the 1200 calorie number that they go towards. So if you think about it, like the 1200 calorie number that they go for is like 1200 calories on Monday, 1200 calories on Tuesday, 2,500 calories Wednesday, Thursday, 4,000 calories on Saturday and Sunday. That's not a 1200 calorie diet. You're better off trying to say to yourself, right, I'm going to have 1,700 calories or 1,800 calories or 1,500 calories, whatever it may be, for the rest of the week. That will still come with under what you did with the 1,200 calorie diet that you supposedly were on.
Yeah.
We're too quick to go, right, I want the quickest fix. Body image. The main thing is self-talk.
Yeah.
Lads have negative self-talk as well, but girls can be quite hard on themselves, especially when they are having those dips of mood from their cycles. And it's being about understanding when that is, tracking your cycle. I highly recommend everyone to do, so you know when these little dips are happening. Keep a journal of how you're feeling around certain times. So people are like, but journaling is like wishy-washy bullshit. I'm like, if it means you can live the life you want to do for like 3 months or 4 months, it's not a long time, and you're going nowhere for 3 or 4 months according to what's happening in the media.
Yeah, true.
COVID. So this could be the time for you to address what's happening. But with slimming clubs and the media and stuff, they have an awful lot to answer for. Sensationalist headings and headlines are what people latch onto. If I put up an ad today and said, right, I can change your habits so you'll lose weight, no one will click on it. If I put up an ad today and said, right, I can make you lose 6 kg in 1 day, people would buy that.
Oh,
that's unfortunately 100%. The way it is. We want everything now, and I don't think people are prepared. Like we've got, like you can find your partner on Tinder or Bumble or whatever it may be by a click of a button. You can order at Amazon or a delivery or whatever it may be by a click of a button. But we're not prepared to do the work on ourselves. That there's no point in looking amazing externally if internally is shit. And a lot of people don't want to do the internal work. They're like, oh, like, don't get me wrong, anyone can lose weight, But you also have to ask yourself, right, is the approach that you have sustainable? Lads will be like a protein, protein, protein. Lads tend to, when they read something, am I talking for myself and Dallas? I can talk for Dallas. Because we've spoken about this before, in that we've gone for the super shoot, we've gone for the quick fixes. Muscle building takes time. But
Yeah.
a lot of lads are like, they get a little bit kind of soft, they get a little bit fluffy in their appearance, and that's when things struggle for them. And I've been there, and that's not easy. With girls, they struggle with, right, the scales, they can struggle with body image, they can struggle with how they talk to themselves. Lads struggle with that too. But it's important for you to say, right, what is going to, can I, whatever I'm doing right now, can I be sticking to this in 5 years? If the answer is no, well, then it's the wrong approach.
Yeah. Do you think women, they're very emotionally tied to it, and that's the issue?
In relation to, they're emotionally tied to
Like, so say with lads, say if they put on a bit of weight, they can kind of like, they'll go, okay, I have to do this, this, and this, and I'll do this. Whereas women will be more like lads are a bit more data driven, whereas women tend to be a bit more like, I'm a terrible person because I put on 6 pounds or a kilo,
yeah. But
or
I
something
think
like that.
it comes back to understanding when your body's working for you. Like, if lads, you compare a lad's journey on a weight loss journey to a girl's journey on a weight loss, girls can only diet for 2, because the other 2 weeks, depending on who the human is, or depending on what the girl, or what the situation with the girl is, you're going to be needing to go up by about 200 calories in the week before, the week of, or go back up to maintenance calories.
Yeah.
So you realistically, it's the 2 weeks kind of like post bleed that are going to be the time for the weight loss to be occurring, and the other 2 weeks are going to be like understanding now is not the time to push, or now is the time to push my training, understanding that cravings are coming in, understanding that not beating yourself up for this, what's triggering my cravings, is it stress, is it work? Like, we are in an adrenaline overload world at the minute. Like, everyone's on the go. Like, people are sitting down for days and days and days at the minute, and everything's blurring into each other. But it's about recognizing what your triggers are. And once you recognize the trends, it becomes easier for you to bring it back and say, right, this is when I need to have a little bit more love for myself, so that the body image, don't get me wrong, there's going to be negative things coming into your head, but it's having the systems in place, and right, how do I address this, or how do I speak to myself? And one of the tools that I use with my girls, with many of them, and one of many of the tools, is a fact v opinion, a tool.
Yeah.
So if you're having a negative image, or if you're having a negative day and a negative thought comes into your head, write it down on a piece of paper. Okay.
Yeah.
So then you say, right, am I creating this issue, or is this a fact about me? And then you can say, right, I'm actually creating this problem because I'm tired, stressed, emotional. I need to eat. I haven't eaten all day. My husband's pissed me off. My partner's pissed me off. My child has run into the wall again, whatever it may be. But if you write it down, you can see it in black and white. You can address, all right, I'm on the week of fact v opinion. I feel fat. Well, fat's not a feeling. Fat's an emotional. Fat's an image of self-esteem and body image. Fat's not a feeling. I'm feeling bloated. That's a feeling.
Yeah.
That's a sensation. There's a very, very big difference between the two. The language that we use towards ourselves is so big. If you're calling food good or bad, that's bringing in the whole thing of, oh, if I press the big red button, something's going to happen. I've been told not to press this. Same thing. If you latch on to the bad food, no such thing as bad foods. Foods do not have a moral compass. But if you latch onto the bad thing, it's like, well, when willpower or motivation or sad times are coming in, that's when that food's going to be reached for. But if you can recognize your triggers and say to yourself, no, hang on, I need to show a bit of empathy for myself. I'm going to have some ice cream. I'm going to have some chocolate. Name the food you want rather than labeling good, bad, or treat. Treat is the word that pisses me off so much. Here's this rant that you wanted, Chrissy, by the way.
Go for it.
But like, you have to understand that life isn't going to be a straight line. Weight loss isn't going to be a straight line. Fitness isn't going to be a straight line. If you think of life like a heart rate monitor, there's ups, downs, and kind of stabilizes. That's what life is. For the negative things that happen. If you look at, like, say, my own fitness journey or the podcast journey, the business journey, there's stuff I've done wrong, but I just haven't shown it on social media.
Yeah.
Be mindful of what you're taking in. Are you getting triggered by who you're watching on social media? Are you getting triggered by people, what they're saying? Why are you getting triggered? Because you could be tired. You could have a shit day. You could be on around that time of the month, but it's not about blaming that time of the month. because lads can say that, and some women can kind of say, oh, you won't understand. I won't understand it from a psychological point of view, but I can understand it from a physiological point of view, and saying, right, this is the time that we need to have a little bit more empathy towards you and yourself. Stop beating yourself up. If you're expecting the progress to be perfect around then, you are expecting a miracle. And about setting expectations and having that self-compassion towards yourself.
That's actually a very good point. Like I personally, for me, I would get that, like, not in fitness, but when trying to do the business and stuff like that, and you're just like, you'd be beating yourself up and you're sitting there going, no, like, this is not linear. But I can totally like.
But like, it didn't, like, when you launch a program or someone launches a program and only 3 people sign up, people will be going, no, why didn't it sell 10? Why didn't it sell 20 or whatever it may be? But you haven't done the work. You haven't done the donkey work that someone else is. So if I was to say, someone was comparing their business to, say, James Smith's, James has done the work for 4, 5, 6 years.
Oh, loads.
And he's shown up every day. IGTVs, podcasts, books. He's shown up every single day. But people don't want to do the work. People are like, oh, I want everything now, without doing the work. And that's the problem. People just don't want to put the effort in. Like, these days, I feel like giving up. But people are afraid to put themselves out there. People are afraid to fail. People are afraid to do the work in the fear, in the fact that it may not get them to where they want to go. But the one thing I can guarantee is you are not going to get anywhere from not failing. You're not going to get anywhere from not doing anything. And it's the same with the weight loss thing. I don't want this to be a whole thing of you must sweat or you must do X, Y, and Z with your fitness. That's not what it is. And that's not what I promote. I promote balance. I don't promote restriction. Restriction won't work for a lot of people, and they go for extremes really, really easily. We look at what's on social media. We see that as a highlight, and we forget that's a highlight reel. People are only showing success stories, and they're not necessarily showing you how they failed. You will fail along the way, but it's about how you talk to yourself along that way. How about you give yourself the compassion of, like, not when you can't train or anything like that. It's about saying to yourself, right, maybe this isn't the time for me to push. Maybe it's the week of and you're feeling like fatigued. Maybe this is just a week for you to kind of go for a walk. If you're having bad cramps, just go for a walk. If you're finding you have more energy, that's the week to push it. But it's about setting small goals along the way. Don't say to yourself, in the next 3 months, I'm going to go to the gym 90 out of 90 days. Why not break it down and say, right, I'm going to go to the gym or train for 36 times out of those 90. Takes a lot less pressure off you. You've got 3 times a week. You also have to realize that you may be a parent as well. You also have to realize that as well. Like, kids are running into walls. Like, that's just fact. And you have to say to yourself, right, what if I just win the day by going for a walk? And there's nothing wrong with that. People underrate walking and that side of things. My main thing for walking right now is my mental health. If your 6 inches between your 2 ears aren't playing game for you, nothing else is going to work. Realistically, you can drive yourself into the ground with fitness and fitness. You're not going to fitness yourself out of COVID. You're not going to be able to out-train yourself out of COVID. That's not what this is about. It's about saying to yourself, setting small little goals over time that are going to get you to where you want to go, but you have to understand where you want to go and expect you will fail. Like, if we were talking off air, Gracie, about like the podcast guests and reaching out to people. You see the people who are on, but there are other people. I'm very grateful for the people who have put on, by the way, but you don't see the people who have said no.
That's true.
And that's a big thing. You don't see the stuff that goes on in the background. You see transformations, but you don't see what the person has done to get there. You don't see the small habit changes in their sleep, getting the kids out for a walk.
Do you think people underestimate the power of things like going for a walk and drinking water?
Yeah, people go for the next gimmick. People go for, like, oh, this powder is going to bring my hair back or whatever it may be. People don't want to do the unsexy stuff. The unsexy stuff doesn't sell.
No.
People are like, oh, here's HIIT sessions. These are the best things since sliced bread. Oh, this new bread is the greatest thing of all time. This new vitamin or mineral is going to solve all my problems. Nope. It's not. They're not. They're marketed in a certain way to get to a pain point that you may have. They're picking on an emotional attachment to what you have about yourself, like waist trainers or whatever it may be. Waist trainers are a big pile of shit.
Oh yeah.
kickbacks on a treadmill or a Stairmaster. Stop doing them. But people forget about the basics. The basics are the foundations that your house is built on.
Yeah.
But if you forget those foundations, you may as well be building a house on matchsticks.
Very good point.
Like your sleep, it affects your mood, your energy, your training, how you talk to yourself, how you speak to others, your hunger levels, your cravings. Your water will help with your digestion, will help with your mood, your cognitive function, making sure you're not bloated. Your vegetables will help with digestion, getting minerals and vitamins into your body, help you have more energy, and help reduce any bloating. And then you've got the kind of the other elements of having protein with each meal. Protein, people are like, oh, if I have protein, I'm going to get bulky. That's not how it works. Like, I wish it was that easy. I really, really do. But protein is huge for especially for girls, in that you have to make sure that you have got some protein with each meal as best you can in relation to bone health as you get older. If you don't have enough protein into your body now, which if you're not training, 0.8 grams per kg of body weight. If you are training, 1.2 grams per kg of body weight is what I would aim for. Getting a portion of protein into each meal, it will save you a hell of a lot of effort. And I had Natalie Lennon on, and she spoke about the importance of female health and osteoporosis and osteopenia. And she's had an incredible journey, but she's been through it. Unfortunately, she's gone through it.
That was an amazing episode, by the way.
She's an awesome human. She's been on a couple of times now. I chat to her a bit. And it just happened to coincide with International Women's Day as well, that episode was coming out. But sometimes people have to go through the rough times to find out what actually they want to do. And I've had to do that with my own mental health. But I just don't want people to make the same mistakes.
Yeah, no, like if you can help someone,
it's also needed. But it's also taking the feedback from it, because if you're going for these mad, crazy diets all the time, they're not working. Definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You can't expect different results if you haven't changed how you see yourself. So much more of what we realize about fitness and psychology, or fitness and the whole thing, is psychology. Dallas and I are always talking about this, in that how we talk to ourselves, how we word things to ourselves, the language we use, the self-compassion that we show to ourselves is the hardest part. And people forget about it. They're like, no, I can go and do keto. I can go and cut out carbs. Please don't do any of those.
Don't do that, no.
So you have to understand that, like, bring the human element of it. Everyone's human. It's about showing the compassion to yourself and saying, right, I can manage this, and I may need to tweak other elements. But if you're saying to yourself, I'm going to go hell for leather on this and forget the pillars, the basic pillars and the basic foundations, you're setting yourself up for failure straight away. No wonder people have failed.
Yeah, that's very true. You put that across really well.
A lot of people forget about you don't see that they may have had 1 or 2 weeks where they didn't go according to what they thought that they needed to do, that being perfect. If you're expecting it to be perfect, you expect failure. Like you are going to fail if you expect perfection, because perfection doesn't exist.
What would you like to see removed from this industry?
Where do I start?
Or top 3 things you want out?
Top 20? No.
Or 3.
Not 3. I think I'd rather than trying to remove things, because I don't think it's about removing things. I think it's about adding things in. I think an education towards the kids, so that the next generation doesn't have to go for the extremes that we do at the minute. And an education on that carbs aren't bad for you. I think an element of kind of like a mental health thing. I know I think England have brought in, and the UK have brought in a minister for mental health. I think potentially we could bring in that and put more resources into mental health. I think what's happening now in COVID is making people realize is that there's an awful lot of stuff going on that they haven't dealt with, because they've got a little bit more downtime, that they aren't really coping with what's going on internally, and they haven't dealt with it. They've been pushing it down, and now they're kind of like a little bit restricted in their movements. They're not aware of how they're feeling. And I would also bring in a massive element of trying to kind of, what's the word, trying to bring in some sort of element of governance over the fitness industry. It's not going to happen. The big companies are making too much money for the supplements and stuff for it to happen. I would like to see it. I can't see it happening in my lifetime, if ever. But I think I'd rather bring that in. It's not the evidence that's being shown around supplements and stuff must not be biased from the supplement company, and the supplement companies must not pay for it. It has to be done from a non-biased funding. And I think people forget that side of things. And education, more mental health aspect, and a bit more governance on the fitness industry, rather than trying to take more stuff out. Because I think if we take more stuff out, people will just keep working on the ideology of taking stuff out is what they need to do in life anyway. And it's more kind of like working with what's there and tweaking what's there.
I like what you say about the governance of the fitness industry. That's really true. Like that and nutrition, because like anyone can pretty much, you know, set up a page and tell you this is what you to do. And if they get enough followers, they can spread misinformation very quickly.
But you can find any paper to make your point. Like you can find a paper saying that keto is the greatest thing of all time, and I don't have a real problem with keto and the fact that there is a reason for it. It was created to help with epileptic kids. That was the reason for it. But people forget that. People don't realize that, and people go for keto because it's like, oh, I'm cutting out a food group, so I'm definitely going to be able to do this. But that's where the problem lies. It's those extremes that need to be tweaked, and the balance. Like balance does not sell. Balance does not. It works long term. Ask yourself, the diet that you are going on right now, can you see yourself sticking to it in 5 years? And it's not about being on a diet for 5 years. It's about approaching or adopting the lifestyle for yourself in 5 years. And if one or two things don't go right, looking back and saying, why didn't that go right? What could I have done better? And realizing why that didn't work.
That's very, very true. What was the biggest mindset shift you needed to make yourself when you moved into this industry?
Stop caring what other people think. Was the biggest thing. I think everyone's been caught up in this when they're in the fitness industry. They are caring what other PTs and other nutritionists and stuff are ultimately going to think of them. But you also have to think of that they're not going to pay your bills. They're not going to be your clients. Like I do have PT clients, but the vast majority of my clients are John and Mary down the road. And it's about trying to, like, I'm sure people are always like, oh, why doesn't Shane go on camera anymore? Like, I've had that before. Why don't you do IGTVs, or why don't you talk your stories anymore? I don't particularly enjoy it. I'd rather kind of talk about stuff or being able to say something on a post, because people will read stuff. Hopefully they'll look at a caption on that might resonate with them more so than looking at an IGTV or whatever it may be. But it's about saying to yourself, right, the person who was saying the negative stuff about you, and I had this when I first started the podcast, that people weren't very supportive of it, and I was like, well, I know why I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And the people who are potentially negative towards me now have unfortunately lost their jobs because of what's happening. People are afraid to do things differently. People are afraid to stand out. People are afraid to make something that they don't really understand why they're doing it. People, and I've no problem. Like what I've realized is a lot of coaches and a lot of trainers are sometimes better training themselves than training other people, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But don't knock other people out there who are actually putting themselves out there on a platform. Don't knock other people who are trying to help. Don't be a keyboard warrior.
God, yeah.
Like I had a comment to me last summer that you look like a 13-year-old prepubescent boy. Okay, so I was kind of like, well, my mate works for, say, one of the social media companies, and I was kind of like, well, can we kind of have a look who it is? So we found out who it was, and I know who it is, and unfortunately that person is hurt right now with what's happening. I haven't said it to them, and I know who it is, but it's kind of like hurt people. Like people are bored right now. They're looking for an outlet. They're looking at social media, but going on social media doesn't give you the right to comment on someone's post, and you don't know where that person's headspace is, that certain trigger, and that could trigger something and could cause a spiral. If you have something to say, write it down. Do not feel under any pressure to put your negative comments under whatever we're doing. If you don't like something, That's fine. You don't have to agree with everything that is out there. Don't take your shit headspace from what you've been doing and put that on us. We are out there putting on information onto a platform while you've got a profile picture of you and a cat. So don't fucking come at people who are trying to help people when you're stuck in this negative shit headspace and you're trying to knock other people down so you can feel better about yourself.
Yeah.
Try it. Don't do it.
I really agree with that. I never was one who'd post, but I was the person who did the negative thoughts about it. And when I identified and realized it was my problem, I was like, it makes so much easier. Like, I still follow some people. I was like, oh, what are they at? And now I'm like, oh no, they're doing good. Like, shut up. You're the problem, not them. And it's actually made such a difference to my own mindset as well.
But like, and I'm sure people were like, why are you starting the podcast? And I'm sure you're like, well, I enjoyed the podcast. And that's one element that you've learned from that this is something that you want to do. This is for you. And over time that will build up and that will stand to you. But other people are afraid of starting, and they put people will always put on their insecurities onto you. And that's why I'm always reluctant to ask for loads of people's advice, because you're going to get different outputs. They're going to put their own insecurities on it. So I'm lucky enough to have people that I'll go to. I'll ask my dad about finance stuff, and I genuinely would be lost without the advice that he's provided to me about taking on new coaches and stuff, and the legalities and stuff.
Yeah.
I've also bounced ideas off Dallas regarding posts or content for podcasts, or about taking on the new coach. Are we ready for that, systems and stuff? Because it's my brand, I'm attached to it. I have blinkers on. But Dallas is coming from a point of view is he's only new to the systems. So he's tweaked things since we came in.
Yeah.
And I'm all open for that. But you also have to say to yourself, right, this is going to ask yourself, is the person that you're asking for advice of, have they walked the walk themselves? Have they changed something that you're trying to change yourself? If they haven't, I wouldn't ask for them. It's like asking someone for relationship advice when they've been divorced 5 times.
Yeah.
Same thing.
It's a very, very good point. And just on that one, what would you say is the best piece of advice you've ever received?
I think it's tough because from like the personal life stuff, I think just start was like too similar set to like those 2 words definitely resonated with me. Don't care what other people think definitely resonated with me. But I think the philosophy that I kind of live by is kind of what's meant for you won't pass you by. Okay. And I think if I hadn't got sick in 2017, I don't think I'll be alive. So things happened. They made me take a step back. There was shit times for 12 months, but it allows me to live whatever the rest of life is the way I want to do, the values but I want to do. And yeah, that's kind of like what's meant for you won't pass you by is kind of like the best thing that and that's in a book, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. So yeah.
I think a lot of people, like you say there, that was something that was really bad for you, but a lot of people are like, yeah, well, I've had shit times, so
everyone's gonna have shit times. You're expecting times to be fucking perfect and daisies and all that kind of stuff. You're kidding yourself. It's like the heart rate monitor. It's going to be ups and downs, but it's how you talk to yourself. It's how you get up from those things. It's how you understand and kind of latch on to the bad times. And I'm very, if something happens now, I'm very like, my dad says it all the time, it's like, you're very analytical about things. I'm like, yeah, but I don't think I was analytical before. I was like, I would take things very personally. Okay. But I've had to go through that shit time in order to kind of like, I'm tired now. So if someone has said to me, if someone said something negative, I'm like, I'm tired now. So let's just go for a walk and come back to it, or sleep on something. Or if a job comes in or a gig comes in, I'm kind of like, if it's not a fuck yeah, it's a no.
Yeah.
I like there's been stuff, I'm very fortunate, stuff coming in and gigs coming in and all that kind of stuff, but I've had to say no because I know it's going to spread me too thin. Like I was thinking about signing up for a course last night. I sent the link to Dallas. He's like, are you signing up for this? And I go, I don't think I have the time for it. He goes, I'm glad you said that. So that's an idea to bounce off Dallas, but I knew the answer. But I wouldn't have said that. I wouldn't have sent that to one of the other lads out of my school group, because they were like, oh yeah, well, she definitely do it.
Yes, you know who to ask.
Yeah, and like it's important to have that. I know everyone doesn't have the support group around them, and I'm very, very lucky, and I'm not trying to gloat on that side of things, but the one person in your life right now may not have all the elements of what you're looking for. But there's an amazing concept from The Values Factor by John DeMartini. He says, whoever's in your life right now is meant to be there. Yeah. One person could be the person for love relationship advice. One person could be business advice. One person could be mental health advice. One person could be fitness advice. One person could be nutrition advice. Every single one of those can bring something different to the table.
I think that's everything I was going to ask you today, and a few extra things that kind of came with the podcast, which is always great. I love when that happens. So thank you for joining us. Shane, do you want to tell everyone where you can be found, where they can find you?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on, Chrissy. I really, really appreciate it. So people can find me at shanewalshfitness on Instagram. The podcast is Shane Walsh Fitness Podcast. It's available up on iTunes and up on Spotify. And if you're interested in working with myself and coaching and joining Team SWF, www.shanewalshfitness.com, or else pop us a DM. I do Q&As kind of like a few times a week. So if you have questions, just pop them into there. And don't be afraid to pop us a question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. The only thing that's stupid is not asking a question.
That is a very, very good point. I love that. So thanks again for coming on. And guys, everybody, thank you for listening. And remember, you can find me on Instagram at Chrissy H Fitness, and also on TikTok. So you'll see all my silly stuff there, and that's also Chrissy H Fitness. So thanks for listening. Thank you again for listening to the Why Not podcast. It really means a lot that you are listening in, and I would love if you could please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or subscribe on Spotify. And always, I'd love to hear feedback personally, so if you do want to leave me a message and let me know how you found the podcast, please do.